What if the fear that keeps you awake at night is not that you will be hurt, but that you will be forgotten? What if the real question in your heart is not, will he be good, but what's igzenand for du district nakanux? Will he ever come at all? Single sister, be honest for a moment. How many times have you smiled in front of people, but deep inside you were asking yourself, why is everyone else moving forward and I am still here, waiting? You see others getting married. You hear stories of love. You watch timelines change, and slowly, silently, a thought begins to grow inside you. What if it never happens for me? But what if I told you that this fear, this overthinking, this waiting is not a sign that you are forgotten. It may be a sign that Allah is writing something you cannot yet see. And before we go deeper into this, tell me honestly, where are you watching this video from and what time is it right now in your city or country? Because maybe this message reached you at exactly the moment you needed to hear it. Your wait is not empty. Single sister, listen carefully, because this is where your perspective begins to change in a way that most people never allow themselves to see, and that is why they continue to suffer in silence, thinking they are stuck, thinking they are forgotten, thinking they are simply waiting while life moves forward without them. But you are not just waiting, you are being shaped, slowly, quietly, in ways that cannot be seen on the surface and cannot be measured by time or compared with anyone else's journey. You wake up some days feeling strong, telling yourself that you trust Allah, telling yourself that everything will happen at the right time. But then there are nights, long nights, where your thoughts become louder than your faith, where questions begin to repeat themselves again and again, asking you why nothing is changing, asking you why you feel ready but nothing is arriving, asking you why your heart feels full of love yet has no place to give it. And in those moments it feels like you are standing still while the world moves on without you. But what you fail to see is that nothing about your situation is empty. Nothing about this phase is meaningless, and nothing about your waiting is wasted, because Allah does not delay something without purpose, and He does not hold something back from you, unless there is something within you that is still being prepared. Something that needs to grow stronger, something that needs to become more aware, more patient, more protected from what could have broken you if it came too early. There are things you are being saved from that you do not even know about. There are people who could have entered your life and left deeper wounds than the loneliness you feel right now. There are situations that looked like love on the outside but carried pain on the inside, and if they had reached you before you were ready, they would not have completed you. They would have damaged you, and that is why your delay is not a punishment, it is protection. Because real love, the kind that is written by Allah, the kind that brings peace instead of confusion, the kind that strengthens your faith instead of weakening it, does not come to a heart that is still learning how to recognize its own value, and it does not arrive at a time when you would accept less just because you are tired of waiting. You are not just being made to wait, you are being taught what not to accept. You are being shown what does not align with your future. You are being guided away from paths that may have looked beautiful in the beginning, but would have ended in regret. And every moment you choose patience over desperation, every time you walk away from something that feels emotionally tempting but spiritually wrong, you are building a version of yourself that will not settle for temporary comfort at the cost of long-term peace. And this is something many people never learn, which is why they rush, which is why they settle, which is why they end up in relationships that drain them, confuse them, and slowly pull them away from who they were meant to be. But you are being held back for a reason. Allah says in the Quran, perhaps you dislike something while it is good for you, and perhaps you love something while it is bad for you. Allah knows, and you do not know. Let that sink into your heart slowly, because the very thing you are afraid of right now, the delay, the waiting, the unanswered longing, could be the exact thing protecting you from a future that would have brought you pain instead of peace. So instead of asking, why am I still waiting, begin to ask, what is Allah preparing me for during this time? Because the moment you change that question, your entire understanding of this phase begins to change, and you will realize You were never empty. You were always in the process of becoming. Your overthinking is not the truth. Single sister, there is something you need to understand about your mind, especially in moments of loneliness and silence, because not every thought that feels real is actually true, and not every fear that feels strong is actually a reflection of your reality. Yet over time, when you sit alone with your thoughts, when you replay situations, when you compare your life with others, when you scroll and see people moving forward while you feel like nothing is changing for you, those thoughts begin to sound convincing. They begin to feel like facts. And slowly, without even realizing it, you start building a belief system based on fear instead of truth. You begin to ask yourself questions that slowly damage your sense of worth. Questions like, what is wrong with me? Or why am I not being chosen? Or am I not enough? And these questions do not come once. They repeat themselves. They echo in your mind at night. They return in moments of silence. They grow stronger when you feel emotionally tired. And eventually, they stop sounding like questions and start sounding like answers, as if your mind has already decided that there must be something lacking within you, something missing, something that makes you less deserving of love. But listen carefully, because this is where most people go wrong. Your mind does not always tell you the truth. It tells you what you repeatedly feed it. And if you constantly feed it comparison, if you constantly expose it to timelines that are not yours, if you measure your life based on what you see others achieving, then your mind will create a story where you are behind, where you are late, where you are somehow less, even when none of that is written by Allah. You are not behind. You are on a different timeline, one that was written specifically for you, one that takes into account things you cannot see, things you do not yet understand, things that are being arranged in ways beyond your control. And when you try to rush that timeline, when you try to force something just because you feel ready emotionally, you risk stepping into something that was never meant to be yours in the first place. And this is where overthinking becomes dangerous, because it pushes you toward decisions that are based on fear of being alone, not on clarity of what is right. It makes you more willing to accept confusion, more willing to ignore red flags, more willing to hold on to people who give you just enough attention to keep you attached, but not enough commitment to give you peace. And in that state, you begin to lower your standards without even noticing it. You tell yourself that maybe you are asking for too much, maybe you should be more understanding, maybe you should be more patient with someone who is not even sure about you, and slowly you start accepting less than what your heart truly needs, not because you believe it is right, but because you are afraid that if you let go, there will be nothing else. But that fear is not from truth, because what Allah has written for you does not require you to shrink yourself to receive it. It does not require you to chase it, and it does not depend on your anxiety to arrive on time. Allah says in the Quran, "And whoever puts their trust in Allah, then He is sufficient for them." Understand what this really means on a deeper level. It means that your future is not dependent on your overthinking. It is not dependent on how much you worry, and it is not delayed because you are not trying hard enough. Because if something is written for you, it will come to you in a way that does not destroy your peace while you wait for it. So instead of asking yourself, what if I never find him? Ask yourself something more honest. What if my thoughts have been lying to me this whole time? Because the moment you begin to question your fears instead of believing them blindly, you take back control of your heart, you create space for trust, and you allow yourself to breathe again without feeling like time is running out. And slowly, that heavy feeling inside your chest begins to loosen, because you realize you were never running out of time. You were just listening to the wrong voice. What you lost was not meant to stay. Single sister, there is a part of your story that still holds you back, even if you don't talk about it anymore, even if you pretend that you have moved on, even if you tell yourself that you are over it, because deep inside there are moments, memories, and people that you still revisit in your mind, quietly, without anyone knowing. And sometimes you wonder what would have happened if things had gone differently, if they had stayed, if they had chosen you the way you were ready to choose them. You remember how it started, how it felt easy, how it felt real, how it felt like maybe this time it was different, maybe this time it would actually lead somewhere, and for a moment you allowed yourself to hope. You allowed yourself to imagine a future. You allowed your heart to open in a way that felt both beautiful and terrifying at the same time. And then slowly things changed, not always in a dramatic way, not always with a clear ending, but in subtle shifts, in delayed replies, in uncertain words, in actions that no longer matched what was once promised. And before you even realized what was happening, you were the only one still holding on to something that had already started to slip away. And that is the part that hurts the most. Not just that they left, but that they left while you were still there, still caring, still trying to understand, still hoping that maybe things would go back to how they were in the beginning. And you kept asking yourself what went wrong, what you could have done differently, what you should have said or not said. And without realizing it, you started blaming yourself for something that was never in your control. But listen carefully, because this is where your healing begins. Not every connection that feels strong is meant to last. Not every person who enters your life is written to stay, and not every beginning is meant to reach an ending that you imagine in your heart, because sometimes Allah allows someone to come close to you just enough for you to learn something, just enough for you to see something within yourself, just enough for you to recognize what you truly need and what you should never accept again. And when they leave, it does not mean you were not enough. It means they were not meant. There is a difference, a powerful difference, between rejection and redirection. But when you are emotionally attached, you cannot see that clearly, because your heart focuses on what it lost, not on what it was saved from. And that is why you continue to revisit the past, trying to make sense of it, trying to find closure in memories that were never meant to give you peace. But what if you looked at it differently? What if you accepted that if they were truly written for you, they would not have been removed from your life so easily? They would not have left you in confusion. They would not have made you question your worth. Because what is meant for you does not create constant uncertainty. It does not leave you feeling like you have to prove yourself. And it does not disappear when things become real. Allah does not take something away from you without a reason, and He does not remove someone from your life without wisdom, even if you cannot see it in that moment, even if it feels like loss, even if it leaves you with questions that remain unanswered for a long time. Allah says in the Quran, "It may be that you dislike a thing while it is good for you, and it may be that you love a thing while it is bad for you. Allah knows, and you do not know." Reflect on this deeply, because the very person you are still thinking about, the one you believed could have been your future, the one you still feel attached to in quiet moments, may have been the exact reason your future needed protection. And if they had stayed, they might have taken you down a path that looked like love in the beginning but would have ended in pain, confusion, and regret. So instead of asking, "Why did they leave me?" ask yourself something more powerful. Why did Allah remove them from my life? Because when you begin to see it as removal instead of loss, your heart starts to shift, your pain starts to make sense, and your attachment slowly begins to loosen. And one day, without forcing it, you will realize something that once felt impossible to accept. You didn't lose them. You were released from something that was never yours. And in that realization, you begin to feel something you have not felt in a long time: peace. You are not late. You are being timed perfectly. Single sister, there is a quiet pressure that builds inside your heart over time. A pressure that does not always come from words spoken directly to you, but from what you see around you every single day, from the people who once stood beside you and are now moving ahead, from the weddings you attend where you smile, congratulate, and genuinely feel happy for others, yet return home with a heaviness that you cannot explain, from the subtle questions people ask, from the timelines society silently places on you, and from the comparison that slowly grows without you even choosing it. And before you realize it, you start to feel like you are behind. You begin to measure your life through the progress of others. You begin to question your own journey based on someone else's timing, and you start to feel like there must be something wrong, Because if everyone else is finding their person, if everyone else is moving forward, if everyone else is stepping into a new chapter, then why are you still here, in the same place, asking the same questions, carrying the same hope that feels like it is not being answered? But listen carefully, because this is where your understanding must change. If you want your heart to find peace, you are not late, and your life is not delayed in the way you think it is, because time as you see it is not the same as how Allah has written it, and the timeline you are comparing yourself to was never designed for you in the first place. Every person you see has a different story, a different path, a different set of tests, and a different set of outcomes. And what looks like progress on the outside does not always reflect peace on the inside, because there are people who found love quickly but are struggling in silence. There are people who entered relationships that looked perfect but are dealing with pain they never expected. And there are people who rushed into something because they felt late, only to realize later that they were not ready for what they stepped into. And this is something you do not always see, because people share their highlights, not their hardships. They show the moments that look beautiful, not the struggles that happen behind closed doors. And when you compare your reality to their presentation, you create a false belief that you are the only one who is still waiting, when in reality, your waiting may be the very thing protecting you from stepping into something that you are not meant to carry. Because not every right time is truly right, and not every early is truly better. There is a difference between something happening quickly and something happening correctly, and Allah does not rush what is meant to last. Allah says in the Quran, "And your Lord creates what He wills and chooses. They have no choice." Let that settle in your heart for a moment, because it reminds you that your life is not unfolding randomly. It is not delayed because you are forgotten, and it is not paused because you are less deserving. It is being chosen, moment by moment, by the one who sees what you cannot see, who knows what you do not know, and who understands the future you are walking toward in a way you never could. So when you feel like you are falling behind, remind yourself that you are not in a race. You are in a journey that was written specifically for you, with details that were designed for your growth, your protection, and your eventual peace. Because the person written for you is not being delayed by time, they are being aligned with you. And alignment requires preparation on both sides. It requires that you become the version of yourself that will recognize what is right and walk away from what is wrong without hesitation. It requires that your heart learns the difference between attention and intention, between temporary feelings and lasting commitment, between something that excites you and something that truly brings you peace. And until that alignment is complete, things may feel slow, things may feel still, things may feel like nothing is happening, but something is always happening, even in silence, even in waiting, even in moments where you feel like nothing is changing. Allah is arranging, adjusting, protecting, and preparing things in ways you cannot yet see. So instead of asking, "Why am I still here?" ask yourself something deeper. What if this is exactly where I need to be right now? Because the moment you stop fighting your timing, you begin to trust it. And when you trust it, you stop feeling late. You start feeling guided, and that changes everything. The right one will not make you question your worth. Single sister, there is a kind of pain that does not come from being alone, but from being almost chosen, from being close enough to feel something real, yet never secure enough to feel at peace, from giving your attention, your care, your time, and your emotional energy to someone who never fully claimed you, never clearly stood for you, never made you feel certain. And over time, without even realizing it, you begin to shrink yourself just to keep something that was never stable to begin with. You tell yourself that maybe you are expecting too much. Maybe you are reading too deeply into things. Maybe you should be more patient, more understanding, more flexible, and slowly, you begin to silence your own needs. You begin to ignore the discomfort in your chest. You begin to justify behavior that confuses you because you are afraid that if you question it, if you ask for clarity, if you stand firm in what you deserve, you might lose them completely. And that fear, keeps you in a place where you are present but not secure, where you are seen but not truly valued, where you are spoken to but not truly chosen. You start analyzing everything, their tone, their timing, their words, their silence. You begin to search for meaning in small actions. You hold on to moments that feel genuine, and you overlook patterns that clearly show inconsistency, and in that process, you slowly disconnect from your own sense of worth, because you begin to believe that this uncertainty is normal, that this emotional confusion is part of love, that this constant questioning is something you just have to endure. But listen carefully, because this is where your understanding must become stronger than your attachment. Love that is written by Allah does not make you feel like you are too much and not enough at the same time. It does not make you question your value. It does not make you feel like you have to earn consistency, and it does not require you to constantly prove that you are worth choosing. Real love does not keep you in confusion. It brings clarity. Real love does not make you chase. It meets you with intention. Real love does not leave you guessing. It reassures you through actions. And most importantly, real love does not pull you away from your peace. It strengthens it, because anything that is truly meant for you will come with a sense of stability, a sense of respect, and a sense of direction. And even if it is not perfect, even if it requires patience and growth, it will never leave you feeling like you are the only one holding everything together, while the other person remains uncertain. And this is something you must understand deeply, because the moment you accept confusion as love, you lower your standards without realizing it. You begin to tolerate what you once knew was not right, and you allow your heart to stay attached to something that cannot give you the peace you are searching for. Allah says in the Quran, and among His signs is that He created for you from yourselves partners, that you may find tranquility in them, and He placed between you affection and mercy. Focus on the word tranquility, not anxiety, not confusion, not constant overthinking. Tranquility. So if something constantly disturbs your peace, if it keeps you in a state where you are always unsure, always questioning, always trying to figure out where you stand, then you need to ask yourself honestly, is this really what is written for me? Or is this something I am holding on to out of fear? Because the one written for you will not make you feel like you are difficult to love. They will not make you feel like you are asking for too much when you ask for clarity. And they will not disappear when things begin to get serious. They will show up. They will be clear. They will be consistent. And most importantly, they will not make you question your worth. So instead of asking, why can't I keep them? Ask yourself something more honest. Why am I trying to keep someone who does not give me peace? Because the moment you shift that question, you stop chasing what confuses you, and you start protecting what matters most, your heart. And when you begin to protect your heart, you create space for something better to enter your life. Something clearer, something safer, something that will finally make sense. And that is when you will realize you were never asking for too much. You were just asking the wrong person. Allah has not forgotten you. Even when it feels like it, single sister, there is a stage in this journey that is heavier than all the others, a stage where your patience begins to feel tired, where your hope does not disappear completely, but it becomes quiet, fragile, almost hidden inside you, a stage where you are no longer asking loudly, no longer expressing your fears openly, no longer even explaining your emotions to people, because you feel like no one truly understands what it feels like to wait this long, while carrying so many unanswered questions in your heart. You continue your life, you fulfill your responsibilities, you smile when needed, you speak normally, you appear fine on the outside, but inside, there is a constant conversation that never really stops, a quiet voice that asks questions you don't always want to answer. Questions like, is Allah still listening to me? Or why does it feel like my du'as are not being answered? Or how much longer do I have to wait? And these questions are not coming from a place of disbelief. They are coming from a place of emotional exhaustion, from a heart that has been strong for so long that it is simply tired of holding everything together without seeing a clear change. And this is the moment where your faith is not tested through difficulty alone, it is tested through silence. Because it is easier to trust when you see signs, it is easier to remain patient when you feel progress, it is easier to believe when things are moving, but when everything feels still, when nothing seems to change, when your life looks the same while your heart continues to hope for something more, that is when trust becomes real. That is when your connection with Allah is no longer based on what you receive, but on who He is. And you begin to wonder if He truly sees you. Single sister, He does. He sees every moment you chose patience when you could have taken the easier path. He sees every time you held back from something that felt emotionally right but spiritually wrong. He sees every tear that never reached your eyes, every dua that remained unspoken on your lips, every night you turned to Him quietly, asking for something you could not explain to anyone else, and none of it, not a single moment, is ignored. But here is what your heart needs to understand deeply. Allah's response to your dua is not always immediate, and it is not always in the form you expect, because sometimes the answer is not yes right now, and it is not no either. Sometimes the answer is not yes, because you are not ready for what you are asking for, and what you are asking for is not ready for you. And that not yet is where most people struggle, because it feels like nothing is happening. It feels like delay. It feels like silence. But in reality, it is preparation. There are things being arranged beyond your understanding. There are circumstances being aligned. There are hearts being shaped, including yours and the one written for you. There are lessons being completed within you that will protect you from making decisions based on emotion alone. And if everything you wanted came to you exactly when you first asked for it, you might not have been able to handle it. You might not have recognized its value, or worse, you might have lost it because you were not yet the person who could sustain it. And this is something you rarely think about. You focus on when it will come, but not on who you need to become before it arrives. Because love, the kind that lasts, the kind that brings peace instead of chaos, requires emotional maturity, spiritual awareness, patience, clarity, and the ability to recognize what is right without being blinded by feelings alone. And all of these qualities are being built inside you right now, even if you cannot fully see it yet. Allah says in the Quran, "Your Lord has not abandoned you, nor has He become displeased." Reflect on that deeply, because sometimes your heart feels abandoned, not because Allah has left you, but because you cannot see what He is doing for you behind the scenes. You measure presence through visible change, but Allah's presence is constant, even in silence, even in waiting, even in the moments where you feel like nothing is moving. Single sister, your story is not paused. It is unfolding in a way that is not visible yet. And one day, things will begin to shift, slowly at first, in ways you might not even notice immediately. And then suddenly, what once felt impossible will begin to make sense. The delay will feel lighter, the questions will become clearer, and you will realize that the timing you once doubted was actually protecting you all along. Because Allah does not forget, He does not ignore, and He does not delay without purpose. So instead of asking, "Why is nothing happening?" ask yourself something more grounding. What if everything is happening, just not in a way I can see yet? Because the moment you begin to trust that, your heart softens, your anxiety begins to loosen, and your connection with Allah becomes stronger than your fear of the unknown. And that is where true peace begins, not when everything is answered, but when you learn to trust, even when it is not. What if He comes when you finally let go of the fear? Single sister, after everything you have felt, after all the nights of overthinking, after all the moments of comparing, after all the silent questions that lived inside your heart without ever being fully spoken, there comes a stage that feels different from the rest. A stage that is not loud, not emotional in the same overwhelming way, but quiet, steady, and deeply transformative. A stage where something inside you begins to shift, not because your situation suddenly changes, but because your understanding of it finally does. You start to realize that your entire fear was built around one question: what if I never find him? And for a long time, that question controlled your emotions, your thoughts, your expectations, your sense of worth, and even your relationship with Allah at times, because everything felt tied to that outcome. Everything felt like it depended on whether or not that one part of your life would eventually be fulfilled. And because of that, you held on to the idea of him so tightly, even though you had never met him, even though you did not know who he was, even though you could not control when he would enter your life. You still built your emotional stability around something unknown, something unseen, something that had not yet been written into your reality. And that is where the pressure came from. That is where the anxiety grew. That is why every delay felt heavy, because your peace was attached to something that had not yet arrived. But listen carefully, because this is where everything changes in a way that most people never experience, because most people never reach this level of awareness. There comes a moment where you begin to understand that your life cannot stay paused while you wait for someone to enter it. Your happiness cannot remain dependent on someone who is not yet part of your story, and your sense of worth cannot be built on whether or not you are chosen by another human being. And slowly, gently, without forcing it, you begin to let go, not of the hope, but of the fear. You stop asking the question with panic in your chest. You stop imagining worst-case scenarios. You stop feeling like time is running out. And instead, you begin to live. You begin to focus on your relationship with Allah in a way that is no longer transactional, no longer based on, if you give me this, I will feel okay, but based on trust, on acceptance, on the understanding that whatever comes into your life and whatever stays away from it is happening under the wisdom of the one who knows you better than you know yourself. You start building a life that feels meaningful even without that missing piece. You invest in your growth, your character, your peace. You protect your heart from things that disturb it. You become more selective, more aware, more grounded, and something beautiful happens in that process. You stop feeling incomplete. You stop feeling like you are waiting for your life to begin, because your life is already happening. And this is the moment, the exact moment, where things begin to align in ways you could never have planned. Because when your heart is no longer desperate, it becomes clear. When your mind is no longer overwhelmed by fear, it becomes calm. When your expectations are no longer driven by urgency, they become balanced. And in that state, you are finally able to recognize what is right and walk away from what is wrong without hesitation. Allah says in the Quran, "And whoever fears Allah, He will make for them a way out and will provide for them from where they do not expect." Think about that deeply. From where they do not expect, not from the direction you imagined, not at the time you predicted, not in the way you planned, but in a way that surprises you. And this is why holding on to fear blocks your ability to see clearly, because you become so focused on one specific outcome, one specific timeline, one specific idea of how your story should unfold, that you miss the ways Allah is actually guiding you, protecting you, and preparing something better than what you originally asked for. Single sister, what if the one written for you does not come when you are at your most desperate, but when you are at your most peaceful? What if he enters your life, not as a solution to your loneliness, but as an addition to your already stable and grounded self? What if he comes at a moment where you are no longer chasing love, but recognizing it? Because real love, the kind that is written by Allah, does not arrive to complete a broken identity. It arrives to complement a heart that has already learned how to stand on its own. And that is why your journey has been the way it is. Not to delay you, not to punish you, but to build you into someone who will not lose herself when love finally arrives. Someone who will not accept confusion as affection. Someone who will not trade her peace for temporary attention. Someone who will recognize sincerity and walk away from anything that lacks it. And when you become that person, everything changes. Because now, you are no longer afraid of what if he never comes. You are at peace with when he comes, he will be right. And that peace is more powerful than anything you were feeling before. So instead of asking, "What if I never find him?" ask yourself something that will shift your entire perspective. What if Allah is waiting for me to find peace first, before He sends him? Because the moment you understand that, your waiting no longer feels like emptiness. It feels like preparation. Your fear no longer controls you. It fades. Your heart no longer feels lost. It feels guided. And one day, when everything finally comes together, when the right person enters your life in the right way at the right time, when things feel calm instead of chaotic, clear instead of confusing, steady instead of uncertain, you will look back at every moment you thought you were being delayed, and you will realize something that once felt impossible to believe. You were never forgotten. You were never left behind. You were never meant to settle. You were being prepared for something that would finally make sense. And in that moment, every question you once asked in pain will be answered in peace. Single sister, if you stayed until this moment, then maybe this message was not random. Maybe it reached you in a moment where your heart was quietly asking questions that no one else could hear. Questions you carried alone. Questions you never fully expressed. And yet Allah allowed you to hear these words right now, at this exact time, for a reason. Because your story is not empty, your wait is not wasted, and your heart is not forgotten. You were never behind. You were never overlooked. You were never less deserving. You were simply being guided through a path that required more patience, more strength, and more awareness, so that when what is written for you finally arrives, you will not lose it, you will not question it, and you will not mistake it for something less than what you truly deserve. So stop measuring your life by what you see around you, and start trusting what Allah is doing within you. Stop asking, "When will it happen?" with fear, and start saying, "It will happen," with trust. Because the one written for you is not lost. The moment written for you is not missed. And the love written for you will not pass you by. So breathe, release the fear you have been holding on to for so long. Let go of the pressure that has been weighing on your heart, and trust, even if it feels difficult, even if it feels slow, even if it feels silent, because Allah is never late, and your story is still being written. If this message reached your heart, then don't leave silently. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is in your city right now. And if you are still waiting, just write one word: trust, because sometimes that is all your heart needs to remember.